Hey friends, you're listening to the Calm Mom podcast. It's Michelle Grosser here. Thanks for being with us today. We're going to talk about some ways, I think some sneaky ways, some under the radar ways that anxiety can show up in our parenting. But before we jump in, I want to thank all of you who have left the Calm Mom podcast a 5-star rating and a short review. It means the world to me. It's really the best way you can thank me for all of this content. If any of it has had an impact on your parenting or your well-being or your day-to-day, I'm so grateful for that. And it's also the way through our ratings and through the reviews that we can get this show in front of so many other women who can also use this resource and some encouragement. So if you have not yet left the show a 5-star rating or a short review, if you could do so today, just scroll down, give the show 5 stars. You could write 1 or 2 sentences in a review, just a couple things that have had an impact on you, something you've learned, something you've put into practice, something you've enjoyed. It would really be so helpful in helping to further our mission and helping moms and women overall just be more empowered and present and intentional in all of the spaces they fill. So I'm so grateful for all of you. Thank you for listening. All right, let's dive in. Let's dive into 5 surprising ways that anxiety can show up in our parenting. I want to talk about how it shows up. I want to talk about how it actually manifests, like practically. What does it look like? What might be a sign or a symptom of anxiety in my parenting? And then I kind of want to take a look at the root, right? What's the source? What's the cause? Like, why might we be engaging in these anxious behaviors? I also want to talk for a second about their impact on our kids, right? The ways that we're showing up anxious in parenting, how is that impacting our kids? And then I want to give you guys a couple practical tips to kind of be more aware of it if you want to start making some steps toward change, including nervous system regulation stuff like we always talk about. All right, so the first way that anxiety is probably showing up in your parenting, and I think this is such a common one for all of us, I can definitely raise my hand for this one. The first one is overscheduling our kids' activities. Overscheduling, right? Just constantly filling our kids' schedules with every single thing that drops into our inbox and comes home in our kids' backpack, all the activities, all the sports, all the lessons, all the things, right? In an effort to we all have good intentions about this. We want to ensure our kids are fulfilled, that they're exploring, that different parts of their brain are activated, that they're socialized, that they're pursuing their passions, that they're getting exercise. Like, we know all of the benefits that come with all these activities, right? But sometimes when it's anxiety, we're trying to ensure that our kids are always busy or that they're always productive. And I think that behavior, just constantly filling our kids' schedules, can stem from this. It's almost like a FOMO for our kids, right? It's this belief that keeping our kids busy is going to protect them somehow. It's going to protect them from, a future potential failure. It's going to protect them from not living up to their potential. It's going to protect them from being lonely or isolated. It's going to protect them from being, heaven forbid, bored. And I think a lot of times too, when we look at what might be the root of this overscheduling, is that it's really an overflow of our own overscheduling, right? It's just how our family runs. Everyone's calendar is booked to the nines, and that's just how it is. And I think a lot of times it's driven by, society. It's driven by what we're seeing our neighbors do, what we're comparing to the other kids in the classroom. It's these pressures to make sure that our kids are excelling in so many different areas. But just like our own overscheduling can lead to our burnout, you guys, it also leads to burnout in our kids. Having them jumping from task to task in school all day, then being carted around to all these extracurriculars, then coming home and inhaling a quick dinner and then doing their homework and then going to bed and doing it all over again the next day, that can lead to burnout. That can lead to an increase in stress, right? That can lead to an increase in anxiety in our kids. And a lot of our kids, I think if we talk to them, man, if they sit down and just reflected, they feel like they don't have enough time to relax. They feel like they don't have enough time to just engage in curiosity and free play and all of the things that happen when our kids feel bored, right? And then they have to take accountability for filling their time and being creative and being outside, right? All of these things that are crucial for their development. So what do we do? If you're listening to this and you're like, yeah, I've known for a while now that my kids' schedules are probably overbooked, and I'm exhausted, right? From like running them around all day long. We never just have time to be as a family. Even our weekends are packed to the gills. Where do we start? I mean, just take a look at what you can cut out, right? Balanced schedule that includes, yes, some extracurriculars. Of course, I'm not like anti-activities, anti-sports, anti-lessons, but I'm talking about doing it with intention, right? Do I also have downtime scheduled into our family schedule? Is there also opportunity for my children to experience free play and just kind of putz around the yard and explore without being packed in all of this different structured time, right? That takes away a lot of their opportunities to be creative, right? And to create their own fun and follow their own passions and their own pursuits without everything being spoon-fed to them. So just really reflecting on whether the activities you're engaged in as a family truly benefit not only your children, but your family as a whole, or whether your level of busyness is driven by, this high level FOMO of your kids missing out on something or your family missing out on something that might be rooted actually in anxiety and a scarcity mindset and all these different things that can come into play. I think another thing too is that, there's one thing about being in busy seasons. I think that's true for all of us. It happens, right? When I find myself in a busy season, I sit down and I make sure that this is a sprint and not a marathon. I have made a commitment that I will not be in busy marathons anymore. I will be in busy sprints. So if we're going to be busy for, the next 6 weeks, that's one thing, but we will not be busy for the next 6 months. So if you are in a busy season, take a look at when there's space for that to change or slow down or shift. And then here's what we want to do. Before we add in another new activity, we're going to sit down and we're going to set some clear intentions. We're going to take a look at what our schedule looks like. We're going to make sure that there's time for slowness and stillness and just being and downtime and boredom and all of these different things, right? And then before we add another activity, just asking ourselves like, man, does this really align with our family's values? Does this really align with the way in which I want to model for my children a healthy way of being, where we're not just rushing from thing to thing to thing all day long, right? Where we don't always feel like we're behind, where we don't always feel like we're running late, where we don't always feel like we have to participate in everything or we're going to miss out. Because a lot of times when we get sucked into that way of thinking without realizing it, right? It's well-intentioned, but it's actually being driven by anxiety. And I know for our family, we took all of last year, you guys, all of last year, the whole stinking school year, we took it off from all extracurricular activities. And I'll get them back into something this year. Like they're talking about what music lessons they want to do in the sports they want to. And for reference, my kids were 5 and 6, so they were still really young. But it was a whole year. We had done it before, but it was a whole year last year of no rushing to after school programs, right? I didn't have to work in my car from 4 to 6 while they were in dance class. And it was no more like 8 p.m. dinners. We spent way more time together as a family. And I'm obviously not saying, we shouldn't have our kids in sports or dance or extracurriculars, but it's really just about being mindful. Everything we say yes to means we're saying no to something else. So if we're in a season where we say yes to soccer, but that means, we don't have dinner together 2 nights a week, fine. But if you're running from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. more days than not, your kids are feeling busy, they're feeling rushed, they're feeling that pressure. Like, what is that keeping you from as a family? What's the cost, right? Only you can decide if it's worth it for your family. And sometimes it will be, and that's awesome. And if it's not, then you adjust. But just being mindful, and I think being wary of being super busy as a family, maybe busy for sprints, but not busy for marathons, especially with our kids, right? If it feels super busy, if we notice our kids feel super rushed, there's not a lot of downtime, days are packed, that probably requires a good look. So that's number 1. Number 2, The second way that anxiety often shows up in our parenting is as parents, we start micromanaging all the things, right? We're micromanaging our kids' homework. We're micromanaging their deadlines. We're micromanaging their projects. We're micromanaging their lunches and their all the things, right? All the things that they need for their after school programs or whatever it is, right? We're just like supervising and we're watching and we're controlling everything. We're correcting their mistakes. And a lot of times it's this like underlying need that things be quote unquote perfect. So I know for me, the overachiever in me can struggle with this one. Again, my kids are young, right? Like they just finished kindergarten and first grade. But when I sat with them, it's summer now, but when I sat with them over the school year to help them with their homework, like I had to be really aware of this urge that kind of arises in me to comment on their penmanship and make sure that it's super neat, right? And comment on, I don't know, like that Harriet Tubman sculpture that doesn't look particularly human, right? And I'm all about a spirit of excellence. Like, don't get me wrong. I'm all about teaching my kids to give their best effort. Awesome. But I think where it might cross the line for me, and maybe for you too, is if I'm subconsciously kind of sending and perpetuating this message of perfection to my kids, striving for perfection without even realizing it, right? Or maybe it's like my own competitive spirit and my kid's project might not be the best one, right? Or maybe it's my own fear of failing, or maybe it's a fear deep within me subconsciously that their teachers are judging me, right? And it might sound super dumb, but when I stop and I assess and I reflect, these are some subconscious things that drive a lot of parents, and they can drive me too. And where does this come from? I think behavior like this, micromanaging our kids, especially in like their homework and their projects and stuff like that, can really stem from this fear that, you know, our kids might fail or our kids might not meet whatever academic standards the school or their teachers or we have set for them, right? And a lot of times that just requires us to really kind of flip it and look in the mirror about our own anxiety, about our own success, right? And a lot of times what's happening here is that we're reflecting our kids' achievements on ourselves. So if my kids do well on this project, or if my kids get straight A's, or if my kids get, you know, an A on this thing, then that reflects that I'm doing a good job as a parent. When that's not necessarily a cause and effect relationship, right? Are there correlations? Probably. I'm not denying that, but I'm just saying that a lot of times these fears of our own that are kind of running under the surface, right, can have an impact that we don't realize, which is perpetuating this pattern of perfectionism in our own children. Micromanaging like that, you guys, it really undermines our kids' confidence, right? They don't have the opportunities to build the confidence that, hey, I can do this on my own, right? I can do this tracing or penmanship assignment on my own, or I can do this math homework on my own. My teacher's already taught me how, right? I'm doing my homework now. I can do it without my mom over my shoulder commenting on every little thing that I do. And it also undermines their independence. We want our kids to grow in independence. We want them to grow in that confidence. And a lot of times that means we have to make space for them to try things and for it to be messy and for them to fail and know that it's okay and that it's safe and they can pivot and they can adjust and they can learn and they can keep going. And a lot of it, what are some practical tips? I think if we want to empower that independence, a lot of it is really just encouraging our kids to take ownership, right? We can offer them support. Absolutely. We can help clarify. We can answer questions. We can do all of these things, but sometimes we need to get uncomfortable with our own stuff and allow our kids to make mistakes, allow our kids to learn from their own mistakes. And then I think a lot of times something else that's wrapped up in this is that we can kind of shift the place from which we focus when it comes to our kids' stuff, right? I'm talking about homework. I'm talking about extracurriculars. I'm talking about the stuff that they're passionate about. Instead of focusing and praising on the outcome, right? The end result, expecting the perfection, right? What we want to do is we want to praise their effort. We want to focus on their effort. We want to focus on what they're putting into it, their resilience, their focus, their ability to pivot, their creativity. Like we want to be able to reinforce to them that mistakes are normal, mistakes are natural, mistakes are part of the learning experience lifelong, right? Not just when we're kids. So that's number 2. Number 3, I think a third way that anxiety can show up in parenting, and this kind of relates to the last one we just talked about, but I think the third way that it can show up is that we have a really hard time letting our kids make their own decisions, letting our kids make their own choices. So we make decisions for our kids from like really basic stuff, like this is what you're going to have for breakfast, to like a lot bigger stuff, right? And we make all of these decisions for our kids because we don't want them to make the wrong choice or make a mistake or fail or, whatever it is. And I mean, like, would I prefer that my kids didn't wear the same Paw Patrol t-shirt and faded, stained leggings and hot pink, sparkly light up unicorn rainbow sneakers every flipping day? Like, probably. I would probably prefer they didn't, right? Maybe my ego would at least. But like, gosh darn it, that's what she wants to wear every day. And I love her for it. And I love the self-expression and I love her confidence. And ultimately, that's my job as her parent, right? I want to foster her inner voice. I want to foster healthy self-talk. I want to foster her growing identity and her confidence and her self-expression rather than, what I think should be her fashion. And why do we do this? I think we have a hard time letting our kids make decisions because, one, we don't want them to do anything harmful, right? Obviously. But I think a lot of this actually comes from like, what are people going to think? Especially for clothes, right? Like what our kids are wearing, what they're doing, like what are other people going to think? But for other decisions we want to make for them, I think a lot of it comes from our desire to protect them from disappointment. A lot of it can be rooted in our own fear, our own uncertainty, our own lack of control. But what happens is that when we don't let our kids practice making choices, small choices, medium choices, right? Even some bigger choices, depending on their age and their development and their maturity and all of these different things. When we don't allow them those opportunities to practice, it really hinders the development of their decision-making skills. And again, it goes back to confidence. So much confidence comes from trying to do things on their own, making their own choices, seeing it play out, dealing with the consequences of those choices, right? Whether they be positive or negative, doing it in their own ability with us there to catch them and kind of put them back on track like guardrails on the highway. And when we don't allow them those opportunities and we do everything for them, our kids can become overly reliant on us, right? Overly reliant on us for guidance, for actually doing the things, for making all the choices. And then all of a sudden, it's like 18 years from now, they're out of the house and they haven't had a chance to practice these things, to make their own choices, to self-reference, to follow their intuition, right? To weigh pros and cons, to make good choices in a healthy way. So where do we start? I think we start just there. Like, what are some age-appropriate choices you can help your kids practice making on their own, right? Start with really small stuff. What do you want to wear today? What shoes do you want to wear today? You want to have this or that for breakfast, right? Should we go here or there on Saturday morning? Do you want to call grandma now or after dinner? Like little stuff, you guys. And then you can gradually increase their autonomy as they grow, as their brain develops, as their maturity grows, and as they learn how to do this, because it's a skill. It's a practice. As long as it's safe, let them make decisions. Even let them make decisions that aren't the best decision or aren't the decision that you would make. And after those decisions are made, again, as long as it's safe, right? Man, just discuss it with them. Hey, I noticed that you did this instead of doing that. What happened after you did it? Yeah, I saw that. I noticed the same thing, right? Let's talk about it and talk it through with them. Celebrate their successes, right? Discuss what they can learn from the things that didn't go so hot. Like that is such a beautiful parenting opportunity that builds their confidence, builds that little voice in their head saying like, hey, I'm equipped to do this. I'm empowered to do this. I'm able to do this. And if it doesn't go how I thought it would, I'm actually resilient enough to adjust and pivot and try it again a different way. And that's a lifelong, beautiful skill we're giving our kids. So that's number 3. Number 4, the fourth symptom or way I think that anxiety can show up in our parenting, and we talk about this one a lot on the podcast, but it's reacting like super intensely, maybe even overreacting to things that are actually pretty minor, right? So maybe it's reacting to like a small problem, overreacting to a small problem or a mistake. Kid spills a drink and you're losing it, right? They come home with a bad grade on some project. Like it just feels so big to you. You have this super big, intense reaction. And guys, this is all about your window of tolerance. When we talk about our nervous system, right? We all have a capacity to handle life. And when we are living on the edge of our window of tolerance because we're not taking care of ourselves and we don't have practices in place to regulate our nervous system and to feel and release and discharge our emotions, and we don't have good boundaries and we don't have good coping mechanisms and all of these different things, right? We're not even doing the basics. We're not sleeping and eating well and moving our body. All of those things shrink our window of tolerance. And then one tiny little thing is enough to just kind of push us over the edge into this big response that does not match the stimulus, right? And a lot of that's driven by underlying anxiety, this heightened kind of stress response. Minor things just feel like really big threats to us. And how does that impact our kids? I mean, you don't have to have a good imagination to see how this can impact our kids, right? When we're feeling really edgy and irritable and easily triggered, like everyone walks on eggshells around us. And our kids probably feel like they need to, I think, just be perfect. Like they can't, they're trying to do everything that they can so that they don't trigger us, right? They're trying to avoid triggering a big, intense reaction in us. So that kind of leads to their own anxiety and their own hypervigilance and their own trying to judge things and always kind of be on the lookout and take the temperature in the room so that they can try to act accordingly to prevent some big outburst. So what can we do? Well, big work here is really doing the work and learning how to regulate your nervous system and grow your window of tolerance. You're going to need to, you're going to need to learn how to create space, both on the outside, right, in your external environment, and then also internally, right, in your somatic body, creating space so you're not constantly living on the edge where every little thing just kind of triggers you and pushes you over that edge. And then second, you're going to have to learn how to close the stress loop in your body. When you are constantly in a state of fight or flight and your body does not know how to close that loop and come back down to homeostasis and regulation and baseline stress level, you're going to be having these big reactions instead of being able to respond effectively to your kids or anyone for that matter. And then the third one is if you're feeling really irritated and kind of edgy and annoyed and anxious, whatever it is where you're like, I know my fuse is really short right now, you've got to have some tools, not a whole toolbox, but like 3 or 4 things, 3 or 4 practices, 3 or 4 resources in your back pocket to help you regulate your nervous system. And guys, we're running Restore again in the fall. It's our small group coaching program. We spend 7 weeks inside of Restore learning how to regulate our nervous system and expand your capacity. I will teach you how to expand your capacity so that you can handle more of life without losing your cool, right? You're going to learn how to grow your window of tolerance. And it's super powerful. It's a super powerful thing to understand in life, in business, in parenting, any space we fill. We want to have the capacity, expanded capacity to handle life, because y'all hear me say all the time, life keeps on lifing. So we got to be able to handle it. And then number 5, I think the 5th way that anxiety tends to show up in parenting is that we can have a hard time setting and holding boundaries. Boundaries. Week 5 of Restore is all about setting boundaries, you guys. We go deep. So if you are someone who knows you struggle to set boundaries, who knows you struggle to enforce rules or set limits with your kids, maybe it's around, what's accepted behavior in our home, right? How do we speak to each other? What are things that are okay to do and not okay to do in this house, right? What kind of boundaries do you have around screen time or bedtime or how you discipline your kids or whatever it is, right? Maybe you're like, man, I had this boundary and I explained it to my kids and then they just kept asking me over and over and I was so tired and I just find that I keep like giving in, right? To avoid conflict or because it's easier or because of the guilt or whatever it is. That is a place where you need practice holding a better boundary. And a lot of times, you guys, anxiety is what can make it difficult to set boundaries. and to hold and maintain healthy boundaries. Because as people, and especially as parents, we fear rejection, right? We fear being perceived as rude or as harsh or as inflexible or as difficult. We fear that boundaries and setting boundaries are going to create conflict, and that feels really uncomfortable. But what happens, especially in parenting, is that our children need healthy boundaries. Like, as much as they wouldn't ever admit it, they just don't know, they crave the protection and the stability that comes with our boundaries for them. They need us to be their guardrails, right? They need us to be their prefrontal cortex because their brains are literally not developed enough to make good choices all the time. And inconsistent boundaries can lead to a lot of confusion for our kids. They can lead to feeling like manipulation. They can lead to feeling like there's a sense of untrustworthiness because we say things and we don't follow through on them. So the next time we say things, right, why should anyone listen to us? We don't mean it anyway. It can lead to insecurity, which ultimately I think can lead to attachment issues. So yes, our kids, if we don't set good boundaries, I think our kids are probably going to try to test our limits more frequently, right? They're going to struggle with some self-discipline because we're not even disciplined in the boundaries that we're setting and that we're holding. So what are some practical tips here? I think number one is, well, maybe it's not number one, number two, and then I'll do number one. Number two is consistency, right? I know for us in the grocer house, like we just don't have a lot of rules in our house. We don't. I'm not the biggest rule person. I think we have to be really careful about rules that we set. And that's probably a whole other episode that we can go down if you guys are interested. But here's the thing. My kids know that I say what I mean and that I mean what I say. And I'm not a perfect parent by any means, but I certainly do not make promises or threats for that matter that I cannot keep. And I clearly communicate my expectations for my children around the things that are important to us as a family and our values. And then I follow through with the consequences or the things that I said were going to happen if we don't rise to the level of the expectations that were communicated. It's not rules, it's boundaries, right? It's not a rule. We never do this. We always do this. We have to do that. I don't believe in that. However, there are things in our home, boundaries that we've set, expectations that we've communicated that we are consistent with and that we follow through on and that we model ourselves, right? That's the most important thing. And then I think number one, we're going backwards. Number one, when it comes to these boundaries, self-compassion, you guys, being gentle with yourself. If you struggle setting boundaries with your kids, I'm going to assume that you probably also struggle setting boundaries with yourself and with other adults. And there's probably something deeper going on there, right? Maybe it's people pleasing. Maybe it's avoiding confrontation or conflict, doesn't feel safe because of your upbringing for whatever reason. Maybe it's your own insecure attachments in childhood. Maybe you just haven't been taught how to set boundaries and enforce boundaries. And you have all of these paradigms around boundaries and people who set boundaries that really need to be challenged. Boundaries aren't rude. Boundaries do not have to be disrespectful. They're actually really healthy and they're really loving. So if I'm speaking to you in this, I just want to invite you to keep the fall cohort of Restore on your radar because it's going to happen in September. More information to come, but it's going to be so, so, so great for you guys if today's episode really hit home for you. And I think that by starting to really recognize these different or 5 different anxiety-driven behaviors and starting to implement some of these practical tips, right? Leaning into the discomfort of delegating and loosening our grip on control and letting our kids make mistakes in a safe way, right? All of those are pushing against what anxiety would tell us to do. And what our anxiety would tell us is scary or not safe, and questioning that, right? Is this actually unsafe, or is this just anxiety and fear and fight or flight talking right now? And then using that as kind of a measuring tool to create a more supportive and calm environment for both us and for our kids, right? Fostering their growth and fostering their well-being. All right, my friends, so grateful that you were with us today. I'm believing that you enjoyed this episode. I'm believing it was helpful. I would love to hear your thoughts. I would love to hear what resonated. You can drop it in a review. That would be awesome. You can shoot me a DM at It's Michelle Grosser on Instagram, or you can send me an email, hello@michellegrosser.com. I always love hearing from you guys. Have a great rest of the day. I'll talk to you guys soon. Be well.